This is the Three Things with your host, Gene Church. Today's issue, the state of the presidential race. Do you find yourself seriously confused about where this race is right now? I can understand why. The Real Clear Politics average sits at 7.5% this evening. It looks on paper like it's pretty good for Joe Biden. He hasn't had to come out on the campaign trail. He doesn't have to answer questions about anything controversial. He has had the mainstream media strongly supporting him and on a daily attack against the president. He has Facebook and Twitter and Google lining up to censor the president and to support him. Looks like an easy win, doesn't it? And yet, the Democrats are concerned. They are advocating for policies to increase the chances of voter fraud, and they remain worried. Why? Well, after all, Democrats were so wrong 4 years ago. They have tried on numerous occasions for this. The different excuses have been numerous. Hillary was a bad candidate. The Russians elected Trump, or there was some other influence that stole it from them. They've spent 4 long years mourning over the loss of the 2016 election to the point that they are unwilling to accept another 2020 loss. Few have considered the other possibilities as to why they lost. They lost because they insulted and ignored middle America, and they allowed the Republican Party to bring the working man into their ranks, and that polling firms can take identical data and draw different conclusions. Now, why is that the case? Well, the reason why is that a random selection of voters polled that lacks a sufficient number of women, say, that are anticipated, then the weight of females has to be increased. Not enough blacks, then the weight has to go to where the polling expects it to be. And that ultimately is the problem. If a polling firm has inadequate or incorrect assumptions concerning what the breakdown of the populace looks like, the conclusions that they reach are also going to be false. When a huge number of Americans vote early, and most are Democrats, then the pollster may assume that this means that there's a huge increase in the number of Democrats and weigh them more heavily to get the percentages that they get. But that addresses the fact that there can be other options. For example, while Republicans often outvote Democrats with absentee voting, when the Democrats push for absentee voting and the Republicans push for in-person voting, we may only be looking at those individuals who would have normally voted on election day, but are now voting early. So if we have a much smaller number of Democrats voting on election day, to support the pollsters, you have to assume that the people who did not vote 4 years ago will be voting now. But what do we know about what this looks like? Well, amongst the newly registered Republicans, they have out-registered the Democrats in all of the swing states. In Pennsylvania, where Trump won 4 years ago by 46,000 votes, Republicans have added an additional 200,000 voters more than Democrats have. The Democrats have very little ground game in these states, leaving Trump to send staff going door to door and bringing in new voters. Like 4 years ago, Trump is gathering huge crowds at outdoor rallies at airports around the country. Excuse me. Democrats can't get crowds together at all. They rely almost entirely on hatred for Donald Trump to win this race. But they're doing this with a lackluster candidate supported by leftists who want to overturn our nation. The polls are daunting, but the polls are no worse off than they were 4 years ago for the president. And unlike most elections where undecided voters break for the challenger, in this instance, undecided voters are likely to break for the president. Why? Because they may have personal feelings of dislike toward the president, but they very much like their current circumstance. In fact, the head of the Trafalgar Group, one of the most favorable polling groups from 2016 and 2018, shows a Trump win and shows Trump, as he did 4 years ago winning, shows us today a lead for the president would put him in the high 270s in electoral votes, with the prospect of even a bigger win this time than last. Who are these people that don't know who they're going to vote for or what they're going to do? Well, they are among the 56% of Americans who told Gallup that they were better off now than they were 4 years ago, even though their situation was such that they do not personally like Donald Trump, but they do like the pocketbook issues and the things in the economy that have made them so much better off. It is the very reason that Biden shows a lead in the polls, but he can't get that poll amount to a level of 50%. Among the swing states, though, Trump is likely to win in the states of Texas, Iowa, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and even Arizona. But a win for Trump requires that he win Pennsylvania and two of the remaining states, Michigan, Wisconsin, or Minnesota. Can he do it? I don't know. He showed the ability before, and he shows a real energy now. No one has quite figured out how to calibrate the data on early voting, the Republican surge in the swing state registrations, and the effect of the nation's biggest campuses, mostly in swing states, being either closed down or at least not fully open on election day. Biden is sitting still. He's running a virtual campaign in fear of the virus, of questions about Hunter Biden, and of his suspected intention to pack the court or stop fracking, or of most anything. Trump took risk along with 100 million Americans who feed, fuel, and make things for Americans. You can no more run a campaign from the basement than you can run a presidency or a country. The latest new debate rules that silence a candidate's microphone to ensure his rival can offer 2 minutes of opening remarks without interruption at the beginning of each 15-minute segment of the debate could ironically prove to Trump's advantage. Often, when Biden speaks for longer than 90 seconds without interruption, he tends to either say the most astounding things possible or not anything much at all. The Hunter Biden scandal is a problem for Biden, and not just because of the scandal itself, but because of the press cover-up of the issues. A groundswell of anger toward the social media will likely cause new and angry voters to turn out. Data on people attending Trump rallies show that a quarter of the people either voted Democrat previously or did not vote at all. This decision will get down to a question of whether the public is scared or optimistic. The Democrats want to convince the American people that the economy is destroyed, not because of the Chinese, but because of Trump, and that we will face death and economic destruction unless Joe Biden is elected. Biden, of course, has gone so far as to suggest that violence on the streets will go away if Trump is not reelected. So we're left with the prospect that the Democrats control the violence on the streets. Biden has created fear that a new vaccine may not be good enough for Americans. And the president offers hope, a return of the economy, and the creation of a vaccine and production of it at breakneck speed. This is an unusual election in that the positions are so stark. Trump should press Biden simply for yes or no answers. Joe, is it true what you've denied for years about your son's activities, or what your son says you did in the emails? And are you for or against, yes or no, about fracking, Green New Deal, reparations, the wall, tax cuts, court packing, ending the Electoral College, ending the Senate filibuster, and admitting 2 more states? And of course, when Biden won't answer yes or no to these questions, Trump could simply smile and say to the American people, there you have it. He doesn't think you deserve an answer, and Joe can't give one even if he wanted. His leftist masters haven't told him yet. Trump will have the opportunity tomorrow night to draw that distinction. He can suggest that whatever your politics, you can join him in restoring our institutions. Americans, left or right, Republican or Democrat, cannot remain free if our traditional and social media are not independent and fair. None of us will have a future if our elite collude with China to further its interest or ours. Without the police, none of us are safe, in the inner city or the suburbs. And we all want Washington officials to serve Americans and not waste our precious resources trying to destroy them. Trump needs to encourage Americans not to help Joe Biden make America into something it never was and never will be. Tomorrow night, we will review for the debate. I'd ask that you join us at 7:30 Central tomorrow night, and we'll watch the debate at 8 o'clock Central. For the Three Things, I'm Gene Church.